Hi, friends. It's Sarah. Um, so this conversation is going to be a bit of a ramble, because I kind of don't really know. I have a lot of thoughts, but trying to make them clear is a little difficult. Um, so I'm just kind of gonna try and think it out. And obviously, given the subject matter, this video comes with a warning for talking about issues around fatness, anti-fatness, weight stigma, and eating disorders. So, content warning. If those issues are going to be difficult for you, you might want to skip this one. So, the singer Taylor Swift came out with a video related to a song in which she's trying to deal with her intrusive thoughts and nightmares and things as it's described. And there is a scene in a particular image that's been going around the media where she, as a very thin, very white woman, on a scale and sees the word fat, and is being like taunted by her inner voice on this. And this is a problem, as a number of people drew attention to. Bit of a tricky problem to talk about, because it adds to there is a overwhelming narrative in society of fat being a nightmare, a horrible thing, and that contributes a great deal to the stigma that we as fat people live with day to day. Just fatness being treated as this horrible thing, and particularly and fat being monstrous, which ends up, as fat people, particularly in this discussion, is largely going to be about fat women and female presenting people. Um, but there is a perception of us as monstrous and bad, and anyone who is not white tends to come in for this in sort of in a double dose, to be fat and not white. And myself, I'm not white, but I'm light skinned, so I'm kind of in the closer proximity to whiteness on this than other people. And so this image that she's produced uh, enters into a wider conversation that has been going on for a long time, usually without the input of fat people ourselves. Um, and this is the thing: any image that you produce, anything that you add into the the world, exists in a context that predates you. And so that is why this image, although it may seem kind of innocuous to people who aren't invested, it is actually contributing to harm, particularly as um, uh, Taylor Swift is a person with a very, very large platform, and so this image she has produced does contribute to that harmful narrative. And this is something that the number of fat people, including myself, tried to point out. But of course, a lot of this discussion has happened on Twitter, and Twitter is a difficult place to have any kind of nuance. And nuance is important here. Um, there are a lot of nuances, because the reason that she has this nightmare, the reason that she produced this image, is because it is due to her history of eating disorders. That is a real thing. I don't want to minimize. This is a thing I have experience with myself, as in fact do a lot of fat people. So there is a lot of context here, and that's why I kind of want to have a bit of a ramble to sort of think out this context, away from a space like Twitter, because it did over the weekend get kind of nasty. Some of the people who commented, who brought attention to this being a problem, got a lot of anti-fat. It got a lot of weight stigma, bullying, and nastiness at them. And then I also saw some people being very dismissive of people with eating disorders, which also is is reductive and unhelpful. So let me begin. I honestly don't know a lot about Taylor Swift. I'm afraid I'm kind of I don't tend to invest a lot in people in learning about musicians and stuff like I music isn't really a special interest of mine. I sort of like what I like, and I don't tend to, I just kind of enjoy it for what it is. I don't tend to um, invest in the people who created a whole lot. Maybe some people, but and pop has never been my thing really. So, um, yeah. So I know that she has a lot of very dedicated fans, and um, also has come in for criticism that is um, likely unfair as well as I gather. So, and you know, I don't know. Maybe there's fair criticism as well. Probably. My point is, I do not have a dog in this fight. I do not know about this person particularly much. I know that I want to focus on this image. So because I don't really know anything about her and I haven't heard anything to make me think otherwise, I want to assume the best intent. I tend to like to assume the best intent, and I am a person that thinks intent does have a place in the discussion. It's not more important than impact. But we can often get in a bit of a binary logic, thinking that either intent is all that matters, or intent doesn't matter at all, and only impact matters. I think they both have a place in any real discussion, and I believe that unless given reason to believe otherwise, we should assume people have good intent. But we also, not to be totally Pollyanna, we also have to assume that people live in this culture, um, and in her case, particularly American culture, but just generally the hegemonic Western culture, and that implies certain things. And so there are certain unconscious biases. We all have unconscious biases. We all have unconscious biases about ourselves, and we all have unconscious biases about people who are different than ourselves. And that's something we have to take responsibility for, but we also, we only know what we know. We can't know what we don't know. So, you know, um, so I'm not assuming malice. And I don't think there is any reason whatsoever to assume malice on the part of Miss Swift. So I am not attacking her for putting out this image. However, there's also we also have to take responsibility, and it's not it's not on it's not simply an individual thing when we talk about responsibility of artists and responsibility of people putting images like this in the world. Because the thing is that this wasn't really put out with a lot of content warning or context or discussion. Um, it was just uh, as a music video, as a piece of art, and more than that, it was put out in promotional stuff and on Twitter and that as just stills from the video, just this image, this use of fat as a nightmare stigmatizing thing. That is a thing that has harmful impact, however it's intended. And as I said, I don't think this was intended maliciously. I think this was a result of someone not considering fat people. And as much as I wish, we had a culture where people did consider fat people, historically, we haven't been considered when it comes to almost anything really. Um, and we aren't don't tend to be consulted about how we might feel about things. So there was no expectation for her to think through how might this image feel to fat people who see it. Now, again, this was a personal image to her. I believe she directed the video. Um, she's trying to work through her own eating disorder, her own anorexic stuff. And I understand to a lot of anorexics, the fear of becoming fat is part of the whole thing. We as a society, we are taught to fear becoming fat. Um, in a weird way, particularly white women, sort of are taught that like to become fat is to sort of lose all the privileges that that position um, entails. Because the role of the white woman as it's you know um, set up in society is to be decorative and to reproduce white men, to please, to look pretty, and to reproduce white men. And is sort of a gilded cage position, where there is a huge amount of pressure to be this ideal in this situation, and that, kind of sucks. And the strain of that gilded cage position tends to be mean that you know in order to maintain it, there's a lot of self damage or harming people who have less power, or sometimes both. And eating disorders is one of the things in which the sort of self harm. We talk a lot about um, toxic masculinity, which I think is sort of, in fact, an embodiment of internalized misogyny. It's it's just men directing it at the feminine things of themselves. There is a thing that's sometimes called corrosive femininity, and eating disorders is sort of part of that. It because the person tends to direct the harm at themselves, in order to maintain the appropriate femininity, and part of that is the um, in this politics of desire aspect is this to harm yourself to maintain the thing to be the desirable ideal. And there is the narratives of society does treat fat women as sort of the threat of fatness, and uses us fat women as sort of like the specter outside that gilded cage. There is sort of a specter of what happens if you lose that that key desirability, that being the thin and pretty, then you lose all the privileges. And so we are the nightmare example meant to hold them in line, which essentially makes them hold themselves in line. That's is part of the societal thinking here, and um, but sometimes people can be a bit reductive and suggest that um, without the politics of desire, without the system of, and without fat phobia, eating disorders wouldn't exist. But that is oversimplified, because we have to remember that eating disorders are, for a lot of people, about control. And when you feel like you have no control in any other aspect of your life, you can feel like the food is the thing you can control. This is a thing I went through when I was a teenager. It also involved self-harm because that was also thing you can control. You know, but you don't imagine me as, as someone who's had that kind of eating disorder because obviously I'm a fat person, so people assume that, uh, people do like to describe as if I have a binge eating disorder, but I did actually have, you know, issues with restrictive, which messes with your metabolism. Um, and that I know was my experience. Like it was about control. When everything else feels out of your control, you look for the things you can control, and that doesn't actually have anything to do. Like it doesn't need to have anything to do with the stigma of around weight gain, but that can be part of the mix. It can be part of the body dysmorphia because, you know, mental health stuff is really complex. So, yeah, I understand that the feelings people have, why they fear fatness, is complex and real. You know, it a lot of it is this external um, society stuff that has gotten into your unconscious bias. You know, it is in, um, it's terroir. What's in the grapes gets in the wine. What's in the society gets into your head and gets into your art. Um, and so again, this is not at all, I think, done with the image wasn't done with any kind of malice, but that doesn't mean it isn't harmful. And something being harmful doesn't, you know, retroactively convey malice. It just, you know, that is a bit. It felt it was not good to see. As a fat person, it wasn't great to see this, like, to see once again another image of, fat. The thing we are fighting to be seen as a neutral thing, be presented again as the nightmare thing. And it also is very frustrating for people to be like, well, why are you taking this personally? Because the thing is, what a lot of people may not recognize is when you talk about your fear of being fat, you are talking about fearing having a body like mine. And that is really not that is personal. You may not intend it to be personal, but like this is the body I live in. It's a body I can't change all that much. I'm sorry. I know that you've been told that it is changeable. Like it's not. Believe me, I've tried. Um, and so when you're saying like that, people have actually said to me that they would harm themselves or prefer to die than have a body like mine. And people said that not thinking that is personal or should hurt me in any way, but it does because what are you saying about me? If you would rather die than live my life, you are making judgments about me, um, and about all of us who are fat. That it is personal when you talk that way. So you can't talk that way to me. You have to, and so like when you talk that way in public, when you talk that way to me, it is harmful. I know you may be working out your own shit, but it still has an impact on me. If, like, say you had a illness that was harming you, and you walked around in the world knowing it was contagious and not taking precautions to prevent yourself from infecting other people, y- you would be harming people. That is an irresponsible thing to do. Uh, I hope that the people who are listening recognize that. I know some people don't. Yeah, even if you need to process those feelings, there is a need to do it responsibly. Um, and I feel this particular instance wasn't responsible, and it's difficult to know how to balance those needs. This is why I said I'm kind of talking this out because I don't fully know. This is the thing is sometimes people's mental health issues, sometimes people's boundaries, sometimes issues rub up against each other, and it's difficult. Um, but there we all need to do our best to try and be responsible towards other people. So then we find ourselves talking about the responsibility of an artist, the responsibility of a creator um, in the world. And I think there's a couple of different issues um, in terms of creation and sharing, because there is the creation and then there is the sharing. And it's useful to kind of separate those two a bit. Um, because sometimes, because when you have something inside you that you need to create, you do need to create, and creating can be a great catharsis of any kind of issues, and I don't think we should. I actually don't think we should put limits on how artists express themselves. Hold on, them not how they, in the making. I think the responsibility comes in the sharing. There are scripts that I've written. There are an entire video that I've recorded too, actually, that I then chose to erase, um, chose to not share because there was something about them that I didn't feel was um, responsible, to people in my community or to the world in general. Um, and so I didn't share them because it didn't feel responsible. And there are other things that, there's a script I've been working on for a while that I've been getting a lot of input from various people because I really want to make sure that when I put it out as responsibly as possible. So I've gotten sensitivity readers. I'm a big fan of sensitivity readers. It's such a great idea to be able to get other people to review your work and tell you how it impacts them and their experience, because how it impacts other people is always going to be different than how it impacts you. And then there's kind of like the responsibility of putting out, putting context, putting content warnings. That can really help to frame things in a responsible way. And then when we're talking about something that has as much potential to harm as talking about eating disorders and trauma from weight stigma, it's really important to have context and content warning stuff. So I will share a piece of art that I made that is not actually vastly dissimilar to the images that she produced for the video. Um, but I'm going to give you context. They're photos, so it's a little easier to sort of. This is a little more of a situation in which context is usually given with art. So, um, I did as an art project for a class. I took an old scale of mine and I defaced it, which is quite fun. And I wrote on it all the things that people have said to me about my weight and all the sort of narratives that have been juggled up. Um so I'm going to reiterate that there's a strong content warning on this video and on these images, um because yeah, this was me sort of catharting on on a scale, the things that I've been told, and the way they sort of feel violent to me. So, I had a bit of fun with pens and nail polish, and you'll see I sort of went to town on this thing. And that, is an art piece, and it's, you know, I'm very specific that these are things people have said to me. But I was trying to capture a sense of the weight of them. Um, so you can see, like, I am giving you context, and there's more to it than just, using the word. Some people who've criticized, this image have suggested, lists of other words that she could have used. Which is the thing. If she if we were in a situation where it was normal to consult uh, what fat people might think um, about something, someone could have said, this image of a thin person being frightened by the word fat is going to bring up stuff for people. Maybe use the word worth, or maybe do this in a slightly different way. Um, and I'm not, again, I'm not faulting her for not having done that, because it's not common practice to do it. But I think, well, I'm like, I'm not saying it's malicious. I'm not saying, like, I I think this is a really good learning opportunity for her, and for others to maybe think in future. You know, I want to. I've made a thing talking about my eating disorder. Before I share it with the world, I want to see how it lands for fat people, to make sure that it's not going to be harmful. And have have see if someone will volunteer to look over that and help you, not put something out that, you know that's going to be, potentially harmful, potentially add to, um you know larger narratives. um because even though there may be small things, like, the more and more that keeps adding, it's like, oh my god, it's every day that we get shit as fat people. It's constant. It's like a fire hose. So yeah, if you could not contribute to the fire hose, that would be great. Um, like, I think the thing that my main comment to the initial image was, please, could artists in future remember that fat people are real humans with actual feelings, even when you represent eating disorders. And I think that um, is a thing that gets kind of lost, because people hear the narratives in the world to not think about us. It becomes a habit to not, consider the experiences of fat people, and how, we might experience things. I mean, the other thing we've been talking a lot about is that movie that's coming out with the fat suit and the thing, which is also one of the valid criticisms of my someone criticizing my criticisms of that film that shall not be named. Um, was to say that, the writer was working through their eating disorder, and that's how they worked through it. And again, I said, my reply to that person was that, the decisions of writing the thing is kind of separate from the decisions of putting it out there. And when you publish something that contains harmful messages, even if that thing was therapeutic to you to write, you have to take responsibility for those harmful messages. In that case, I also think that there is a difference between a play, it's very personal and very intimate, and where you there's sort of a different context than films are extremely public, and film marketing campaigns are even more public. So here's, you know, how a message gets disseminated. So yeah, like anyone should be able to make anything that they feel helps them, that they feel, get whatever is inside them out on the page, on the canvas, into song, whatever. But before you share it with the world, you need to be responsible about it. And when there is someone like a publisher, a publicist involved, when there is a public platform, the responsibility becomes exponential. It's a cliche, but it's also true.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And while Taylor Swift has a lot of power, a lot more than me, the people who really have power are her publicists and the producers and publishers, of her work. And they help this image come out into the world without thinking responsibly about how it would land to um people who have significantly less power, like say fat people. And that is a problem because we need to build in systems of you know thinking about how messages land, and making sure that messages that are harmful to marginalized people, messages that contribute to that marginalization, we just stop that because that's how that's how we change things. Again, I know people are going to say that it's only a music video, it's only a song, just like people say about that movie that it's only a movie. Art is never only art. It's not unimportant because the stories we tell through the songs we sing, through the images we present, through the movies we make, the plays, the books, all of that, the stories we tell are the narratives that shape the world. They are not unimportant. They are, in many ways, the most important thing because they shape how we see the world. It's a very, it's a very Terry Pratchett thing. um, I always end up back in Pratchett. Like we have sort of narrativium in our brain. We things fit story shaped holes. We make life fit into story shaped things because we have story shaped holes in our heads. um, and so when we contribute to the public story, we need to do that thoughtfully. But on the other hand, like there is also the Maya Angelou quote, which is one of the most, important things to remember. I am not canceling Taylor Swift. To imagine that I would have the power to do that. Um, and I'm not like dragging her. Um, I am hoping that, you know, that some criticism, probably not mine, that some valid criticism reaches her, and she considers to do how to do better in the future. And I hope that you who do listen to me, who do hear this, think about how your the stories you tell and the art you produce and what you put into the world, things about how is that going to impact people who have a different experience than you. And I try to do that. And when I fail, because inevitably we will fail because we can never, um, we can't truly imagine the people who are different than us well enough to know when we're going to hurt them. I will hope that you will tell me, uh, and then that I can do my best to when I know better that I can do better. Um, you have done this in the past, and I have done my best to respond. Um, so yeah, like I said, it's a ramble, and I also like as a fat person, I know I talk about fat, and I know that that can be a difficult word for people who have trauma around that word, from eating disorders and stuff, and I do want to be sensitive to that. I don't want to dismiss that, but also like that is part of my reality. Um, and it is a better word than obesity that, you know, refers to eating oneself to death. Like that is not that word is itself one of those, toxic narratives to the world. Um, and I don't want to, prevaricate with like fluffy, God, I hate that, or, you know, or larger person. Plus size refers to clothes, not to people. BBW is a porn category. Not me. Um, so fat is what I am, and I know I understand that that word may be difficult for your own issues, but like I'm not gonna stop. I'm not gonna stop using it. Um, and like I understand if that means that you can't engage with me. Sometimes that's the way that we, have to kind of make our differences work is that we end up, living in, putting boundaries up, and then that's okay. This is like I said, it's a tricky thing when, different experiences interact, different mental health problems, and like perhaps someday we will deal with that sort of politics of desirability that makes that builds this fear of fat for so many um women, and that makes us puts us in the position of monster. That is ultimately what we're working towards, is to try and disrupt that, but that is a long term thing. In the quotidian, in the day to day, we just kind of have to find a way to live together. We have to find a way to kind of engage responsibly. um so you maybe have to understand that if you present fat as itself being a bad thing, even if that is your nightmare, if you put that out in the world, that thing that I am, that is a thing that I am, you know. And so like it's just not responsible to contribute to the narrative that it's a bad thing, even if that's the even if you're coping with the narrative that got into your head of no through no fault of your own. It's sort of like you kind of have to try and work through that in a way that doesn't harm me, and I need to try and work through my issues with weight stigma in a way that doesn't harm you, which is, I'm kind of disappointed in certain fat activist people I feel have been dismissive of eating disorders in this whole discussion, because they are real, and just they're real in a lot of people in a lot of different sizes and different kinds of bodies, and they are about more than just a fear of fatness. Uh, they are part of living in this fucked up world, and you know, eh, and I want to be kind to people who are recovering. I think I ultimately I'd like us all to do as much as possible, just be kind to one another. That this world isn't easy for anyone who's a woman. Um, it's not easy for anyone who's a human, really. But there are challenges that you know uh, that being living in the world, being perceived as female, being perceived as a woman. There are certain frustrations, there are certain difficulties. Um, yeah, I wish we could all be a bit more kind to each other. But I suppose that's wishful thinking. Um, but yeah, the best way we can be kind to one another is to take responsibility for our own actions and our own thoughts. So yeah, I try to. If I hit that wrong, I um, I'm open to that kind of criticism. Um, I yeah. um, yeah, and but yeah, we need to consider those who have less power than us. And yeah, we need to hold those who have more power than us accountable for their actions. And all of the accountability here, I mean, just kind of acknowledgement would be enough. I mean, I think, well, I said I don't, tend to follow people, pop singers and everything too much, but I do. I'm a fat woman, so of course I follow Lizzo. um, and I got to point out, like a few months ago, she, again, unconscious bias, used a word in a song that had context she didn't know is a slur, is ableist. Um, and she listened to people who had the criticism. There were people who were there were people who behaved very badly in the way they were criticizing her. But there were valid criticisms. She listened. She apologized and explained. A very good apology. I'm sorry, and then I didn't intend. Um, and then she released a new version of the song without the probably, replacing the word. That I was incredibly impressed. I think that's the gold standards for how to be responsible when when unconscious bias creeps up. And I would love to see Taylor Swift follow her example. Um, just but even just to acknowledge, like, hey, maybe my bad, maybe this wasn't a good idea. Maybe put a content warning on the video, um, and not, releasing that still as a publicity thing. So making sure that when you have something like that, it's in context, so it can be handled responsibly, and just ideally think a little deeper about how you talk about fatness in the world. And and some things, you know, you edit before you release to the world. As I'm going to edit this ramble because it's been quite a bit of a ramble. So we'll see what sense I make of it. Yeah, so yeah, so hopefully I've edited that to make some sort of sense. Anyway, um, yeah. So as I said, I don't have any ill will towards this person. She's a talented artist. I've liked some of her songs. Um and I'm sorry that she's had eating disorder issues that she has. I know what that's like. A lot of fat people do. So let's just hope for better in the future. We can always just hope for better in the future. So yeah. I hope that I made something of this that is of value to some of you. To maybe think through some of these issues that come up. Maybe how we can all do better. I know I know I can do better. And yeah, let's let's try and do that. Don't really know how to end it. So yeah, thank you as always to my patrons, some of whom you will see in the thingy. And yeah, just be kind to one another. Oh, and I am having a live stream on the 30th. If you want to join, we will be watching The Crow on Sunday the 30th, Devil's Night, um, at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I know it's quite early for something like Crow, but yeah, this is the time that works best for my friends who will be joining me. Ian from Passion of the Nerd hopefully will be joining me unless something comes up, and my darling Jack um, from my podcast, um, my Farscape podcast, Bit Sex and Trauma. And I do intend to fully goth so there we go. We will have that on the 30th. So take care and happy Halloween.